Hey everybody, it's Rabbit. Welcome to the channel, and today we're just going to do a quick and dirty rundown of a bunch of the packs for ground vehicles that are on sale, and I'm just going to give you my opinion as to whether or not they're worth it. And I don't have a content creator code or anything like that yet, so I hope you just take this as my honest opinion as to whether or not these vehicles are worthwhile, because I don't really have anything to gain monetarily from giving you bad advice. Our first contestant is the M728CV. This is also leaving, so if you are a collector and you want to pick this up, then now is your time, but overall, you're not really missing much. The gun is really inconsistent. The mobility is not bad, but the armor is not really that usable. So overall, you could do a lot better. Even at the sale price, I don't think this is worth it. Next up, we have the XM1 packs. Now, the XM1, I was literally just using the XM1 to grind out the Blackhawk and the M109 recently, and it's still very usable even with the changes to its shell. It turns out its big advantage is really its mobility, and mobility is one of the hardest stats to counter, so it still largely works. It's not necessarily the best possible choice, but it is cheaper than the KVT, especially because it's on sale and the KVT isn't. So if you're looking out to grind the American Tech Tree, you could do a lot worse. Next up, we have the Term 3. This thing is completely busted, actually. The fully stabilized gun with a 5-second reload and the 30mm coaxial. This thing is really nutty. I mean, it doesn't have any armor, but it has great mobility. You can grind out most of the German Tech Tree with this pretty easily. It's actually insanely good, and if you have the money, you should definitely pick it up if you're grinding Germany. Next up, we have the Leopard 1. This is the L44 version. I'm going to do a bit of a hot take. I actually think this is better than the Leopard 2A4 because it has the same gun as the 2A4, but it's on a lighter chassis, and you still have lasers, laser rangefinder, you still have thermal imaging. I really like the Leopard A1, L44. You should definitely pick this up if you're grinding Germany. I'm not sure if it's as good as its battle rating as a Term is, because this sees some pretty harsh up tiers into things like Term, the T72 Terms, which you can handle, but it's not as powerful as the Term is relative to the things it fights, but it's still a very good tank. Next up, we have the IS-6. The IS-6 is in a pretty good place in the meta right now. It's at a battle rating where its armor is reasonably consistent outside of some of the heat rounds it runs into. The gun is still pretty effective, even though it does have a bit on the long side in terms of reload. Overall, decent way to grind your way through the tech tree. It is only rank 5, so it's not getting you that far, but it's still pretty usable and it's in a good spot in the meta. Next up, we have the T55AM1. This thing is kind of busted. The armor is reasonably consistent. You have a really nice choice of ammunition for the gun. You have a laser rangefinder. At 8.7, it's kind of hard to beat this vehicle. It really is one of the stronger 8.7s. So if you are looking to grind out the Russian tech tree, is this better than the IS-6? The IS-6 is a little easier to use, but I think the T55 has a little more longevity because it's rank 6. So that would be my general pick. Next up, we have the Centurion Avery. This has the same gun as the CEV, which is very inconsistent, but it is still fun to smack people with. The armor on this is more effective, although the mobility is less so. It's kind of a wash. I think both the vehicles are more of a meme than anything. Pick them up if you have the spare cash, but they're not efficient grinders by any means. Next up, we have the Challenger Desert Storm. The Challenger Desert Storm is a Challenger. There's not really much to say about it. It has a nice reload on its gun, so that's always pretty good. And the armor isn't terrible, but the mobility does kind of let it down a bit. It's a decent grinder for the British Tech Tree, but there is one better grinder that is currently on sale, so I would recommend going for that. Speaking of better grinders, we have the Roycat 105. Fast vehicle, effective gun, also lower battle rating than Challenger DS. You could use this and the DS if you wanted to pick up both of them. I think if you have to choose between the two, the Roycat's a better pick. As I said with the XM1, mobility is the hardest thing in the game to counter, and this thing has the mobility to really make itself a nuisance on the map and do some real damage. So I would pick this over the DS, but you could just pick up both if you wanted more of a lineup. Next up, we have the Somua SM. Again, a rank 5, so not the best grinder because you are going to be missing some of the higher ranks, but this thing is actually pretty nutty. I think on balance, it's actually better than some of the other rank 5s we've looked at just because the gun is super effective and the armor is trolly enough to be useful, and it's also pretty mobile. The Somua SM is really hot. I would definitely seriously consider this if I was grinding the French tech tree. Next up, we have the AMX-30 Super. AMX-30 Super is just a competent MBT. It's not really anything to write home about, but it does generally work, has good mobility, good gun, but it's not great in any one area. Personally, I think the Somua is more powerful relative to the vehicle it fights, but this also does research higher BR vehicles, so it's a bit of a plus and minus there. Ultimately, it's up to you. I think it's useful, but it's not anything that will just blow your socks off. Now we have the Type 16 FPS pack. Type 16, really good Japanese wheeled light vehicle, high mobility, good gun. As I said, mobility is hard to counter. If you are looking for a solid grinder, you can burn through a lot of the Japanese tech tree with this vehicle, and there's not really much else to say about it. I do think it's a pretty solid pickup if you're grinding your way through the Japanese tech tree. Next up, we have the 96A prototype. It has some minor differences in armor versus the Tech Tree 96, and it does have the soft kill system, but both those are kind of irrelevant. The 96As have always been super underrated vehicles. I personally think they're better than the T72 terms. I would definitely recommend this if you're going through the Chinese Tech Tree. Even though it is very similar to a Tech Tree vehicle, it's very functional. So yeah, that one I would generally give a thumbs up to. Next up, we have the VRCC. This is a lot like the advice I'd give you with a lot of the other wheeled vehicles. Mobile enough to get in good positions, your gun is really effective. Not that much else to say about it, other than if you are grinding the Italian tech tree, it is an effective way to do it. Next up, we have the CV9105. This thing is actually pretty busted. Fast reload, punchy gun, good mobility. You also have like laser rangefinder, you have thermal imaging. I mean, this thing is really nutty. You can grind through most of the Swedish tech tree with this. The only thing that might give this competition for like Swedish premium vehicles is the Vidar, but the Vidar isn't on sale right now, so meh. I would definitely pick this up if I was grinding Sweden. Next up, we have the Merkava Mark II D-Pack. If you're grinding Israel, I think this is an easy pick. This is a really solid vehicle. It's very easy to use. It can take hits. Its gun can easily dish out damage. It is at a battle rating that you don't really have anything else in Israel, but you can just use some of the other Merkavas as backup. They work perfectly fine. You have some good cast options for it. Overall, I think it's a really solid pickup, and I have a full review of it in my Merkava grind videos, so check that out if you want to. And last, and honestly kind of least, is the M51 Super Sherman. Personally, I think this is a very functional vehicle. The problem is really that it's just so similar to the Tech Tree vehicle. It's like some minor differences in armor, and you have a roof-mounted 50 cal, and that's kind of it. Overall, it's like if you have the money, go for it, but it's not really anything that's necessary, and there's so little to grind in rank 4 and 5 that it's not really that important, so And that wraps up our short little video. If I had to pick some of the best vehicles on sale, I still think the XM1 is pretty solid, the German Term 3 is pretty nutty, the French Semua SM is also quite good, and of course the Swedish CV9105 is absolutely nutty, so those would be some of my top picks out of this sale. I think some people were expecting some other stuff, and like I kind of was too, but we'll see what happens around like Christmas time, see what those sales look like. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, hope you have fun, and I hope you have a great day, everybody.